The other time I could see calling it would be if you go up to do a persuasion check and you know you got fucking nothing. And just for the fun of it, you're like, look, you don't know me, I don't know you. I've wronged you and you have absolutely no reason to give me what I want. But if you do, come on, a persuasion check. I know I'm coming into this situation poorly prepared. And so it's a funny moment to just throw out the call because I know that there's no way in fuck my DM's just going to hand this to me. If there is no way to bury the roll, you might as well have fun with the meta.
Just let's see if the dice will take me there.
Let's see what my level of success is here. Welcome to Take the Damage podcast by Unfortunate Ones. I'm Sav.
I'm Nix.
And I'm Graythorn.
And our topic for today is, drum roll please.
Oh, sorry.
The mic can't hear that.
Oh.
Just do it with your mouth.
Brrr.
Oh my God, what number is that? 15.
15 is managing salt.
Ooh, managing salt. We've had a decent amount of salt at our table.
Yeah, there's been plenty of instances where either myself or I've seen other players or had to I think it applies in we could talk about it in every single avenue of it, which is seeing a player at the table as you as a fellow player. How do you help deal with the situation?
Yeah.
Especially when you're in a group of friends. You two probably more so as that scenario being playing with strangers. And then as a DM, how do you deal with it? And then even yourself, like if you feel like you're getting wound up, because as I say that, I could think of instances where your brother has wound me up as a DM.
Yeah. Oh, well, I could think of a very specific, he had an understanding of how navigation works that was different than your understanding of how navigation works. And the disagreement was you guys not being able to basically fathom what the other person was saying. And then the argument between you guys just got kind of belligerent. Which I will say, as someone who now does this professionally, back then, when it was just us friends and we were doing it casually, I think the fault was not on you. Now, I would say, as the DM, you have this leadership role, and I think, while you may not have been wrong, I don't think he was necessarily wrong either. To a degree, you were both wrong. Blah blah blah. I think you let it get too far. If that makes sense, that's something that I've had to learn is not allowing things to get too far, being able to put a pause in things and take a step back, whether you're right or wrong, doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think from that moment, or because that happened, it was definitely a learning situation because I never really dealt with something like that.
Yeah.
Where it was just because in my mind, at least from what I remember in the moment, I had an idea of what I was trying to convey and how much information I could actually give based off of the information the player was giving me.
Yeah.
And the player was asking for more information than I wanted to necessarily give because I didn't think the player would have access to that kind of information.
Yeah.
Because it's too far forward. It was I think it was trying to get trajectories. It was it
was trying to get a collision course with another ship, which in his mind was possible and in your mind wasn't.
Yeah.
That was kind of the argument. Which also, I will say, I'll preface this with, I think players have a responsibility they don't realize, and a huge one is you are kind of at the whim of your DM's understanding of the world, and also the DM's full understanding of how their world works, and you arguing with the DM is just bad. So I'll preface it with that. Where I think he was wrong is whether he was getting what he wanted or not, whether what he said made sense or not. It didn't need to become a fight, and there's a certain level of just not giving a fuck that needs to happen on the player's end of things. There's degrees to this, but when it comes to it becoming an argument with the DM and the DM has already deliberated, move on. In general, move on.
That's what I would say, that give at least a little bit of room to be able to have the discussion.
Have a conversation.
Yeah.
But if it starts escalating, as a player, you should realize, like, especially if it escalates past the DM having made a decision, pull your DM aside later.
Yeah.
But in the moment, you are taking everybody at the table's time for you to have an argument with the DM who is playing the role of God in a fantasy world. Now, the other side of this, you should have just had to make an intelligence check or a wisdom check for navigation. And if he could do it, cool. Because even though you didn't like it, it's a game of dice and maybe it's possible. And like, just leave it up to the dice. And you know what? Make it a hide you see. And you could say that before he rolls. You're like, okay, we're at an impasse. I don't really understand or think that what you're saying is possible, but I'm willing to concede that maybe it is. Maybe your player would even know that. So why don't you go ahead and, based on your player stats, make me a roll, and I'll, for the sake of transparency, the DC is this. If you beat that, sure. If not, we're moving on.
Yeah. I mean, I understand that that's probably, like, as an example of as not the correct thing or not the correct, but not the best thing to do in that situation.
We were all pretty new, and none of us had run into that before, of like a serious argument with the DM taking up table time. And I've talked about on the podcast previously the idea that how you understand the world and how someone else understands the world can differ, and that's important. And it's especially important when you're a player, understanding that your DM, how they understand the world and that they're God in this world is important.
Yeah. What I was going to say is, like, my response in that situation was recognizing that I was getting very upset.
Yeah.
To the point that it was no longer going to be like a functional back and forth conversation.
Yeah.
So what I ended up doing was, like, I closed out the session. I was like, hey, I think we've got to stop here.
You rage quit.
Yeah. I stopped just because I knew that, like, I had gotten past the point that I was going to be totally rational about, like, the next parts that I was going to say.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, we got to, like, I recognize it on myself. I was like, hey, I got to stop right now. Like, just because this is, like, we're not going to get into a better place. Like, I rage quit. I just, like, hey, like,
to a degree, I think that was a good move too. At the point where it had gotten to that point.
Yeah.
Because you put a pin in the campaign, and then a week went by, everybody calmed down, and then we got to continue that very scene in a fun way. And it was fun.
Yeah, it was just, it's, at least for me, myself in that moment, having let it get to that point, the moment I recognized that it was no longer going to be a coherent, fun moment, it was like, hey, yeah, dude, we have to stop this. We can continue the next week. Yeah. Yes, the session is going to be short. Yeah, yes, we're not resolving, like, the cool cinematic place. But, like, as soon as I saw that in myself and as soon as I recognized it, it was like, hey, like we're done. Like, we can't keep going. Like, I'm gonna hold on to this, like, the rest of this game if I just try to kind of go through it.
Yeah.
So, like, again, maybe not, it's not the best that I let it get to that point, but it's also, like,
I don't think it was a bad decision at that point.
Yeah. As far as as how I could see myself as a DM, being able to recognize that, like, oh, I'm too angry in this moment. I have too much passion about the thing. I need to kind of get myself out of the situation.
Yeah.
Just because it's, I'm no longer going to be able to make the best decisions continuing down this path.
Yeah. I think, and I think you guys talked about it during the week as well.
Yeah, we talked about it.
Which is another form of managing salt.
Yeah.
You had a salty player and a salty DM, and you guys talked to each other like adults, and then it was fun.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely helps that, like, me and him are best friends. We've known each other for fucking 15
it becomes more
years.
complicated with strangers. One of my, I try not to let it get to this point, but I can't always foresee it. One of my least favorite things is having to deal with things off table mid session because it's so hard to come back from.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Also, like when you're talking about online, there's a level of people wanting anonymity of their issues in general. So, like, oftentimes the way that happens when it gets that far online is like you're mid session and you receive a private message, and then you have to like call the session, and then you can't spend too long talking to that person without other people realizing that something's up. You know what I mean? It just becomes very complicated. It's much nicer when you can handle it at the table. I think at this point, my greatest tool for that is just pausing the session and talking things out as a group. It obviously wastes a lot of time, but if you can do it before any one person feels fully salty, then you can do it as a group discussion rather than it being an open discussion where you're calling someone out, if that makes sense. If you could catch it early enough. But yeah, I don't know. And there's a lot of reasonable times for player assault as well. Like, realistically, I don't know that my brother was even wrong about being able to track a collision course with another ship. I don't know how to do it personally, but it makes enough sense to me, which in the situation doesn't matter because it didn't make enough sense to you. But my point is I understand his salt because I don't even necessarily think that he's wrong that you could do that.
Oh, in terms of like, I don't necessarily remember the full like nuance of what I was arguing, but like, yeah, I don't fault the like, at least in terms of like, sometimes for a lot of situations with saltiness where people feel like, oh, that sucks, or like, how come I don't get that? It's fully in that person's mind, and that person's what they're arguing for. The thing that they're arguing for makes complete sense to them.
Yeah.
Like they're like, oh, this should be
just
like,
a thing.
Like, how come this doesn't work?
You should be able to just punch a horse.
Or shoot somebody in the head that's incapacitated.
Shoot them dead, you mean?
Hey, man.
I don't know that you were actually that salty.
I was.
You were?
I wasn't. I was
you
just like,
wasn't. You weren't.
I was just like,
Should be
unconscious.
I'll be honest. I was
shotgun to the back of the
I
head.
was salty for the first two attempts at me punching a horse outside of combat that was just standing there, and you didn't let me. I couldn't do. At the time, I was so new as well that like it wasn't even in my mind that like I shouldn't have to roll for this. What was in my mind is, how come I'm rolling for this and not able to accomplish this after like 4 tries? How come my player is so incapable of punching a non-moving object that, like, in my mind at the time I was so new to D&D that yeah, you roll for everything in my mind, and that was your mindset as well.
Yeah, it was
now
my first
I wouldn't
time
even
DMing.
make someone roll for that.
Or not my first time DMing, but like the first like big
Campaign
stint of DMing.
Yeah. Yeah, now my complaint would be that I had to roll. But back then it made sense that I had to roll, but it was like, really? An 11 doesn't punch an immovable, like a non-moving object? Like, why am I so incapable? But dealing with that salt, and it worked because of the campaign we were in, it just became funny. And
Yeah.
in the action, I became less salty about it. And then, kind of like we were talking about earlier, I didn't pull you aside, but me and you had a discussion afterwards, and then I think you gave me something that helped first of all, you helped me understand my character sheet. Because I wasn't adding a bonus somewhere.
Yeah, you weren't adding your numbers correctly.
Yeah, and then separate from that, you gave me something that made me a little bit more capable based on the way that I was playing, which was a handout, to be fair.
Sure.
But you made it feel somewhat earned, and then you realized that both me being a new player and the way I was playing the character, that I should be able to punch a horse, at the very least. So you helped me kind of like reorganize my character as well, which felt reasonable. I had a player recently. This has nothing necessarily to do with salt, that hadn't used His subclass, he'd had the subclass the whole time, but it had never come up because it's a really roleplay heavy campaign. And then he reached out to me and he's like, "Hey, I've never even used this feature. Would you mind if I changed my subclass to be this other feature?" Because he's kind of taken on like the leadership role, so he wanted to change to Battlemaster. And I was like, "Yeah, whatever." Like I don't always like the concept of respecking, but sometimes respecking makes sense.
Yeah, I mean to an extent where like, depending on how the game is going, or like, I am much more reasonable. Kind of this is drifting a little bit into something else, but I'm way more reasonable in the same way that you just said, which is the thing really hasn't been used. Like,
Yeah.
like
For all anybody else knows,
Yeah.
you never had it.
yeah, it's especially because at least in my mind, there's a lot of like discovery of your character as you play.
Yeah.
So like, depending on how the game's playing, how the people you're playing with, and the decisions you make,
Yeah.
your character kind of leans in directions that you may not have
Absolutely.
anticipated. So like,
Well, and we had started out past the level where you get subclasses. So they
Yeah.
chose that before they knew what the campaign ever even was.
if your character is like you're constantly leaning in the direction, and you have a thing that like you've never used, you don't plan on using it, and it's just like, yeah, man, have that discussion. I 100% agree with you. Where you're like,
Oh, it's been such a great decision.
Yeah.
Actually, it came up today. It's been such a great decision because they also changed their feat because their other feat wasn't getting used based on how the campaign ended up being, to inspiring leader. And now they like when they use that feat to inspire people, which gives temporary HP, they kind of like improvise a memory of they were in this situation. It was kind of similar, and we should have resolve because of that. You know what I mean? And then usually that same week, sometime midweek, he gives me like a 3-page story of the actual story that he was referring to. So he improvises a moment from his past, and then he gives me a little the story from his past, and it's great. So like letting him respec has added so much depth to the character in such a positive way.
yeah, I mean that I was about to go off on that some more, but I was like, that could be its own thing. Talking about like respecking and all that stuff. It's a little different than managing salt.
It's a little bit different. And that wasn't to mitigate salt, but like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, salt happens for a number of reasons. Salt also happens from bad rolls.
Yeah,
And that one I think is a little harder to play off because I think people just need to have the understanding that like bad rolls happen, you know? Like,
yeah, and
like if it's it's like a 5% chance to critically fail, but if you roll 100 times, that first 5 in a row might be critical fails.
yeah. I mean, it's
Like-
also like another situation with your brother, and another situation where I was DMing, which is like, as a DM, I feel bad if you have a series of poor rolls, and I see that the player's trying to do something.
Yeah.
And it's like, I will try as much as I can to help and like to give certain things, but like, I don't know if it feels unfair or if it feels like what it is that about being a DM and having your players try to do a thing where like, in my mind, it's not reasonable enough, or the player's not doing maybe they're not trying to do something where like it doesn't require a roll. Like, if they could do the thing, if they're asking to do it in a certain way where I don't necessarily need a roll to get the information that they want, it's like, okay, then yeah, I can give them
Sure.
can give them the information. I give them the thing that way. But if it's like the player's asking to do a thing, but they're asking to do it through rolling, where like the situation is like we're leaving it up to rolling.
Yeah.
And you're rolling poorly, it's like, fuck. Like I don't know how I help you. Like I
Well,
want to
it's
help
kind
you.
of to a degree out of your hands at that point. It's why it's a hard version of salt to manage. Is if it's just bad rolls, you didn't make the rolls bad. I'm sorry, but if you're rolling under 5 to do something that is considerably hard to do, I can't give it to you.
Yeah, I think we had at that moment we had another player attempt to do something similar in like a different part of the town or something.
Yeah.
And she rolled well and she got the information and we were able to progress the party forward. But remember, your brother, at least post conversation, post session talking about it. And that, again, that's another one of those managing salt things.
Yeah.
Is I sat down and we were sat down as a group, like talking to him about it, like about from my perspective as a DM, like what I'm trying to do, how I'm trying to manage the situation, and like you said, some of the stuff is just out of my hands. So like,
Yeah.
like in that, even I think even when it was happening, I still like tried to empathetically talk or like say like, man, like I like even saying it out like man, I really
sorry
want
you
to
rolled
give
that.
this to you.
Yeah.
Like I'm sorry that you're like, because I could see that he got upset, and
Yeah.
like I don't want this to happen, and like I like, but you just got like either you got to just keep trying.
I
Like,
could think of a couple ways you could have mitigated that. You could have allowed for lower DCs or less rolls.
I
the
remember
more-
lowering it pretty significantly at certain things.
I wasn't even there for that session. But what I was going to say is like, okay, you're trying to solve a mystery in a town. Clearly the whole town's in on it. You go to the first person, you critically fail. Well, that sucks. You go to another person, you fail again. Well, that sucks. Now, normally, I think a player would just be like, well, I guess this just isn't for me. But if it's intriguing enough to the party for them to be persistent after that, yeah, maybe lower the DC. Or maybe they talk to, all of a sudden you just plant an NPC in the town. Like if they're going to if they're not going to just be like, I failed, I need to move on. If they're not going to do that and they're going to be overly persistent, maybe you have an NPC that's not so super stoked with what's going on in this town. And maybe they're willing to talk without a roll. They're not going to give you everything, but they'll give you a little bit, enough to think about. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think if he was the only player at the table that was willing to do stuff to progress the story forward, I probably would have done something like that. Because I remember lowering the DC pretty substantially with like the certain ways. Because I think he tried like 3 different times to do the thing.
Yeah.
And I remember like his rolls being like sub 8.
Yeah,
like
dog shit,
sub
yeah.
10, sub 8, like really, really bad. And it was like trying to do the conversational stuff through rolling.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, I think if it wasn't a table full of like 5 or 6 people and somebody else didn't volunteer to do a thing and they were successful, I think I would have done something like that. I would have introduced something to the plot, to the story, to be like,
I do that all the time.
yeah,
I don't even think about it fully. Like if you started walking away and they spent half the session on it, and we're like, yeah, okay, cool. What's your passive? Sweet. Because nobody's passive is low enough to not do this.
Yeah.
But it makes it seem like it's only because of your skills. It's actually only because of your skills. And it's like, oh, you hear someone following you.
yeah,
And then they
passives are
look
great for that.
around and
Yeah.
there's no one there. And yeah, but it's like I didn't even necessarily think this through yet. I'm just like, I don't want them to walk away from the situation with nothing. So now like, oh, you see someone passing through and it turns out it's an adventurer who also came to this town. They've also been trying to solve the mystery. And while they don't have all the answers, guess what? They have a couple of the answers to what you've been looking for, and they want your help with solving the situation. You know what I mean? Like it just, the moment he tries walking away, you could give him a little bit of a hook. And then from that point forward, then you can have them go and try and earn it and kind of give them the freebie of they do it without rolling.
Because we've talked about this before in different situations where like we've had it where like, let's say the player or somebody is talking to somebody and they try to get an insight or they try to do an insight check and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And they walk away from the situation. As they're walking away from the situation, as the DM going like, oh, sorry, what was your passive again? Like almost getting it in their head that this is the reason why they're getting this.
The skill matters.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, I have a passive of 10. And it's like, well, 10 happens to meet
10
speeds.
Yeah, 10 happens. Like, oh, as you walk away from the situation, that store, the store merchant you were talking to, there was actually, you don't quite remember what it was that got you, but there was a little bit of twinge of something in the back of your mind that kind of made you feel uneasy about it. So like,
oh man, ever since you brought up that, I think it was Matt Mercer, the idea that passives don't give you answers, but they give you a hook into something. Oh man, I abuse that. Like I just said, the real thing that I'm saying here is that like you can utilize passives that if you as a DM want something to happen, it just will.
Yeah.
Because again, no one has a passive under fucking 10 for perception, or most of your skills really. So like, since you're not giving them the actual thing, you're giving them something they could explore. But they could explore through roleplay, not through roles. And then you're just giving them what you want them to have.
Yeah.
Where like they walk away from the situation. Oh, you're passive of 11, which is fucking nothing.
I mean,
You hear footsteps. You're going to explore the footsteps. If you decide to walk away from this situation, okay, this story wasn't for you. If you decide to explore it at all, you just come upon a person.
Yeah.
And that person is this adventurer who's been trying to figure it out, and they see you trying to figure it out, blah, blah, blah. Like, you could really use passives to, like, if you as a DM want something to happen, then it just does.
Yeah. Well, in that situation, also again, when a play like to cut off salt from building, when a player doesn't normally succeed something, you kind of give them a little bit of that leeway. It's also like God, where was I going to go with that? I was going to say something and then my brain just like left me. I was going to say a whole thing.
Check your passives.
I had a whole thing that
What's
was
your passive persuasion?
Yeah, passive history check in my own brain of what I was thinking of. I was doing the thing that happens, which is I was listening to you, but I wasn't really because I was thinking about the thing.
That's so nice of you to say.
Yeah. And so like as soon as you finished, I started to say the thing and then I just lost it. So I just wasn't listening.
It's a good thing you didn't listen to me and didn't say your thing.
Yeah. Great. It's perfect.
I'm going to get salty. You better mitigate it.
You know? Yeah, I'm not doing nothing.
You fuck. That just cut me off of any thoughts that I was having. It sounded like you were going to go somewhere, you absolute bastard.
So anyways, commercials. I just played.
See what he was actually thinking of was the loot table.
Was the loot table, and when he can cut us off. I'm not going to listen to what Sav's saying because I just want to hear the loot music.
You didn't have to make it so good.
In situations like that, like rolling poorly salt, how much have you experienced that, and how have you dealt with it?
A lot. Yeah, it's actually my players have really bad luck when it comes to rolling the dice at certain times. They're kind of like their digital dice are like my physical dice. They like to roll fours on the face.
Oh, I have a player, and I feel so bad for him because anytime he rolls on Foundry, it's sub 5 on the die.
There's an add-on you can get that actually parses all your dice rolls.
So you can see what your average is?
Yeah, it's funny though because their average is their average or their mean or whatever is actually 10 for most of them. Only one of them has a 13 average. It's the distribution.
Yes, it's when he wants it to be above the 10. It's
never above the 10.
Yeah.
Which is funny because coming into our game 2 weeks ago, I think that everybody rolled a 19 right off the bat. And then after that, there was like 2 20s. I'm like, well, you guys are in for a game when it comes to the end of it here.
I make that joke like every time where it's like they want to like persuade the milkman to give them 50 cents off. And then they critically succeed. And I'm like, yeah, get those out of the way before we get into combat.
Yeah, I did it too. It's true. It happens.
Yeah.
The first time they get into combat, natural 1.
Yeah. Oh, you're role playing a side thing that doesn't matter at all.
20, 19, 18.
I want to get a great bowl of noodles from this place. Like, oh yeah, talk to the store owner. Hey, give me a bowl of noodles. Oh, roll persuasion. Cool. 20.
Yeah. Oh, the guy's gonna kill you. What do you roll? Natural 1.
Ooh. Good thing you got all of those 20s, 17s, 18s, and 19s earlier.
The thing is, you tripped right to expose your neck to his blade.
I don't know. I don't do much for managing salt at least when it comes to dice rolls. I don't think there is much that you can do.
It's so dependent on the player.
It is very dependent on the player. Some of my players are much more reactive to having low rolls consistently than other players are. Another thing is that even if the perspective, even if their perspective is that they're rolling nothing but low numbers and their average rolls across all the rolls is still 10, we as humans just kind of recognize the fact that we recognize the bad more than we recognize the good.
Inevitably.
You'll cling on to the pattern that you want to cling on to,
and there's nothing you can really do about it. I mean, when it comes to
it's just that's just luck.
Yeah, it's just luck. When it comes to like a combat or a battle or a lot of dice rolls that are bad in a roll, I don't try to do anything. I try to make light of it.
Yes, I think that's a good thing.
I will vocally.
I think that's a way to deal with it.
I will vocally laugh when somebody rolls too many times because other people also kind of get into that feeling, and then the other person's like, God, instead of like getting really angry, they're also like, yeah, go on, chide me.
Yeah. Trying to inject humor into a situation like the thing I said, which is you trip and open up your neck to the fucking blade coming into you. Like, I think that helps.
Yeah.
When somebody starts to get upset about the thing, and you as a DM, if you could help, like, either positively spin it in a humoristic way to kind of help.
I mean, you could do that in a serious way as well. I do that. I do that all the time. Whereas, like, I don't do the you expose your neck joke.
No, of course,
because I know every D&D player, at least in more serious campaigns, wants to be the badass, and I don't want to take that away from them. So instead, I described their critical fail in a way where, like, they were like, "Oh, you're thrown off balance, and whatever. You're thrown off balance from the last thing that happened. As you take this slash of person, they manage to dodge it, and as they stand back up straight, you give them a smirk or whatever, and they know another swing's coming." And it's like, now I feel like my critical fail feels like a badass move. You know what I mean? Yeah. You could do it in both. You could do it in both directions for sure.
You're not gonna do like, as you're swinging your sword, you realize you left your bag of holding open. And like, I don't know where I don't know where that was supposed to go.
I don't know either. But yeah, it's really hard to deal with low roll salt when it does happen because like it's a luck thing, and I feel like so much of that salt is very specifically on the player, and the most you can do is like make light of it. And I say that as someone, and sitting across from someone, I'm looking at you over there, Gray. We've had plenty of nights where we roll bad the whole night, like sub 6 the whole night. And it doesn't bother us. Like, it's okay. Yeah. Sometimes the dice do that.
Yeah.
It's just what it is.
All my physical dice are weighted to roll on 4s.
Speaking
Gray is the worst roller I've ever seen.
Yeah, speaking about this situation, I'm trying to think of situations and moments and where I feel like I'm trying to remember if Gray has ever very openly gotten salty. I can't think of any real situations.
I can't think of it.
But I have so many memories of Gray just going like, "This dice no more. Get this dice away."
Oh yeah,
from me.
yeah. Your little
Throw
jail.
this dice
your little
out
dice
of this
jail.
fucking room. So, and that's not really salt. That's kind of like adding like a humoristic.
Yeah,
it's still
humor.
It's still humor, but it's like you have had so many moments.
You're the
where
worst
the
roller
dice
I've
do
ever
not
seen.
want to cooperate with you in anything you want to do, and it's like, dude, it's amazing that you haven't gotten way more salty.
It's to the degree that it's happened at least once in every one of my campaigns. When someone's rolling poorly, I bring you up. As an example, I say it's like, "Oh, yeah, at my home table, my friend who has the most D&D experience of anybody I know, knows the most about the rules, and like has written the most adventures and worlds and everything like that, just super unbelievably into it, is the worst roller I've ever seen." It would be hard for me to believe that your average is 10.
If I could track what my physical dice roll, it is sub 10.
It would have to be.
I would say it's closer to 6.
Have you said that in a game when people roll bad?
Yeah.
Maybe that is another way. Again, taking the humor of the moment. Also, even outside of that moment, dragging one of your friends who is terrible at rolling physical dice.
I didn't know you could be bad at that, but you're really bad at it.
I am. My dice luck is like my life luck. It's awful.
Hey, you remember how bad of luck you have. You are the wealthy, not wealthy. You have the highest income of the person, anybody at this table. So the luck's not terrible. But also,
Only if you set the bar
Really low.
really low.
just also, hey, again, this is another moment to managing salt. One of the harder ones to manage is from rolling. Anybody who's listening, Graythorn, who has a lot of experience playing the game, you could just drag him into the moment and be like, oh, this guy I listen to, he rolls terribly all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Good at role playing, good at sticking in a character, good at solving mysteries.
Usually knows the mechanics of the game very well to be able
Yeah.
to understand the best way, at least in his mind, of how he
Oh,
wants to
I'm a
accomplish
pretty
the game.
experienced DM, and I
Yeah.
constantly lean on Gray's knowledge. Constantly.
Yeah.
Worst roller I've ever
Yeah,
seen.
yeah, worst roll I've ever seen. It's
I
pretty
don't
terrible.
I don't rely on your rolls.
Okay, Graythorn, time to roll. All right. 4 on the die.
Yay.
So that's a 6.
I think I actually do remember moments in which we've decided to you not to roll.
I think like at times where he's like, okay, guys, you guys want to make a check? You want to get my check? I'm like,
Yeah, I'm
let them do it.
Yeah.
I was gonna bring this up earlier in terms of rolls potentially leading to low rolls and low rolls potentially leading to salt. I do not understand players that call out rolls. They don't approach the bartender and say like, "Yeah, I'm gonna talk to the bartender, but I know I only have like a couple silver in my pocket, so I'm gonna be like, hey, can I sing a tale? I am a bard, and maybe get a discount on the drink or a cheaper drink or whatever." That is, so many players don't do that in hopes that their idea just works, which is how I play the game. I will have a plus 15 to something and still attempt not to roll it by just overly describing something to
Yeah.
my DM so they don't realize that there's a roll buried in there. I try to do that all the time. But then there, like, the majority of players that I see are like, yeah, go up to the bartender and I'm like, give me a cheap drink. I want to make a persuasion check.
Yes.
And it's like, why do you want to make checks?
Well, I think a lot of players think that's the best, especially if they are good at that skill.
Yeah.
They think that's the best way to approach it, is to be like, oh, I want to go up to this player.
Give me the roll.
Again, that situation with your brother. I think from what I remember, that's how he approached the situation. Was like, oh, I'm going to go up to this person. Can I make a roll to get this information?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we're going to go to the roll for it. Whereas if you like a lot of how you play the game,
But real quick, I'll even double down is because like a lot of players are way more into role playing. So that like I just want to be clear on this, that I'm not talking about like our old topic from a previous podcast. I'm not talking about someone that just like walks up and they're like, let me make a roll.
yeah,
I've had people go in and describe it to the detail that I would normally describe it in, trying to bury the roll and hide
then
it from the
ask.
DM, and then at the end of it be like, persuasion check. And,
Yeah.
and in my mind as the DM, I was like, I can't tell you this, but you already convinced me and I wasn't going to make you roll. But now that you've called it, now I need to
Oh.
give you the roll. You've just set yourself up for the opportunity to fail where there was none.
I don't know if it's, but that fucking triggered a memory in me. I don't know if everyone is inspired by this necessarily, but that reminds me of Moments in Critical Role, where they will do the whole song and dance. They will say this whole thing. They will do, because they're, again, voice actors and they're actors, and
Sure.
so they're invested in their roles, and so like they'll do this whole thing, and then at the end, right at the end, be like, persuasion check. They'll like add that as part of like the thing that they're doing. And it's like, oh, I think they do it because it's like, how do you get Matt Mercer involved? And like, it's part of like a televised show, and the roles add that randomness and the chaos to the game. So like,
They definitely do, but what I'm saying is that, like, in my mind, that whole thing is dependent on the DM. So
Sure, sure.
maybe if you bury a role in monologue, Matt Mercer is adept enough to that he's going to see the role anyways and make you roll for it anyways, and so you get to look like a badass by calling it yourself. And maybe that's just the
yeah,
the environment of that table, but As a player, in my mind, regardless of DM, I'm gonna try to bury the role in case the DM is not that kind of DM
No,
that wants you to roll for things.
I agree with you completely. And I think, giving credit to Matt Mercer, I believe, depending on how much you get involved, he self-adjusts the DC for like whatever, because you tried hard enough, so the
Sure.
DC would become lower. But I 100% agree with you. I think more players should try to bury
Bury
give
the
enough
role.
evidence so you bury your role. Where you're like, oh, I'm gonna go to this person, say blah blah blah, do this, like blah blah blah, like whatever, and like wait for the DM, like,
Give me a persuasion check.
yeah, you're like, damn.
I thought I buried it.
Because I've done that before. We're playing with you, where I'm like, damn, I thought I did a good enough job.
It really depends. So, like,
Yeah.
and what you will never know is who you're talking to.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, you're talking to the bartender, and you are trying to get information on the local Thieves Guild or whatever. And what you don't know is he fucking runs the show. So, like, it doesn't matter how good you are at talking to this person. If the thing that you're saying is you're taking out the Thieves Guild, like, and you're saying, yeah, you're gonna have to give me a check no matter what you say because of who he is. But if it's just some fucking bartender and you give me the most convincing argument of why information should be had, I think rather than what I often see roles as like putting a pause in the table or a break in the tension, rather than doing that, I might just give it to you. So don't call your rolls out because you might not have to roll. And the only times you wouldn't have to roll is when you just succeed. If you're going to fail, I'm going to have you make a roll at the very least for leveled success. If it's really just somewhere in the middle, but it is a difficult task, and I call you to roll, then you're making a roll for success. If I don't ask you to roll, it's because you've already succeeded. So you announcing to me that you're rolling can only hurt you. But that's me as a DM.
yeah, that's your particular style.
It could be that the table that Matt Mercer holds likes a little bit more of that chaos, a little bit more of what tales the dice have to tell. And therefore, it's never going to be not a roll. And so you can have fun with that by being like, oh, here's my whole explanation. Here's every detail. Here's every reason why you should give me this thing. A persuasion check.
Yes, I think
A boom.
from what I remember, I think that's what happened. I think one of the players at some point did a monologue like that and then asked for the persuasion check and got a chuckle, got like a laugh from the group. So I think
Yeah.
it's kind of like a bit that they do. It's
Yeah.
like this whole thing, and also let's do the bit of this check. You know, it is
Yeah.
this check. And so like I think that's part of it.
The other time I could see calling. Man, we are so far from salt.
We are
The other time I could see calling it would be if you go up to do a persuasion check and you know you got fucking nothing. And just for the fun of it, you're like, look, you don't know me, I don't know you. I've wronged you and you have absolutely no reason to give me what I want. But if you do, you know, come on. A persuasion check. like I know I'm coming into this situation poorly prepared, and so it's a funny moment to just throw out the call because I know that there's no way in fuck my DM's just gonna hand this to me. If there is no way to bury the roll, you might as well have fun with the meta.
Just let's see if the dice will take me there.
Let's see what my leveled success is here. All right. Let's take this moment to move off of dice salt, and before we get into
Well,
any
sort of.
other
We're talking
kind
about a whole different-
any other kind of salt, let's hear a little bit of a word from our sponsors.
Yeah,
Here we go.
come on, everybody. Let's get hyped.
Let's go and roll
Yeah.
on the loot table.
It's the best worst song.
Let's go and see
Let's
who
do
our
it, everybody.
sponsors
Let's see
will
the
be.
sponsors.
Come on. Let's go.
Let's go roll on the loot table.
So bad. Let's go roll on the loot table, y'all. It is a 1.
1. Well, that would be Lineage Quest. Step into a world of wonder and magic with Lineage Quest, the genetic exploration service inspired by tabletop RPG races. Uncover the ancient origins of your lineage, tracing back through the annals of time to discover if you hail from the noble elves of the enchanted forests or the stalwart dwarves of the mountain halls, or perhaps the cunning halflings of the rolling hills. With Lineage Quest, your genetic makeup reveals the fantastical races that course through your veins, unlocking the mysteries of your heroic ancestry. Embrace your heritage and embark on a journey worthy of legend today.
Lineage Quest. I mean, everybody wants to know where they come from. At this point, it's all melting pot. You don't know where you come from, but like you could be an orc.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
You don't know.
I think my favorite part about them is they have a 100% guarantee that they will not turn over this information to like the police or other. They won't sell your
100%
data to like
guarantee.
medical groups.
You know what that sponsor
Unlike
reminds me
other
of?
genetic testing.
We were at a party recently, and we ran into some other D&D nerd, and then I don't know how the conversation started, but we were basically sitting around a campfire, trying to analyze our friends in what species and class they would be. Forgetting the class because that's not related to Lineage Quest, and they're the ones paying us the big bucks. So I'll just talk on that. But
All the electrum.
we were like pointing out, like you're like, my brother's wife, tiefling for sure. There's some fiend in her. You know what I mean?
God, when you're a fucking nerd and you're with your fucking nerdy ass friends, the shit you talk about, and fucking
I got dragged into that. I got absolutely dragged into that, and then I just stayed there forever.
yeah, of course, it's fun to explore what like to just like have a fucking stupid moment with your friends to be like,
Yeah.
oh, your personality traits. What are they closely related to in terms of D&D and fantasy settings?
Yeah.
What makes you elfish and what makes you orc-like? Well, the thing with Lineage Quest is you get a definite
You just get
answer.
to know.
Yeah, you just get to know.
Honestly, if I made the kind of money that Gray made, I would absolutely purchase the services of Lineage Quest.
Yeah.
I would love to know where I come from.
Yeah. Especially like fantastically. Like
Exclusively fantastic.
Yeah. That's the thing is like they don't give you any of the bare bones stupid human races
Who
and like
even
human genetics.
cares?
Ugh. You're just human, but also it gives you all of the different kinds of orcish, fairy.
Turns out you're 99% human and 1% Goliath. That poor ancestral woman in
been
your
the other way.
lineage.
It could have been the other way. Still, actually,
Still unfortunate.
yeah, still,
Because there's nothing in the hallway or you're breaking the hallway. All right.
takes a lot of breathing.
I'm going to be honest. If we keep talking about this
stretching.
fucking sponsor, I'm going to get salty.
I don't know how we manage that though.
No, I don't know. Talking about salt. Overall, just like narratives not going where people wanted them to go, or things happening that like didn't make sense down the line of what they were trying to do. We've actually already talked about this, but we had a little bit of a salt at the a little bit of salt at our table when I kind of ambushed Ace. And yeah, and it really didn't matter how much reasoning there was behind it. He was a little salty. He felt like his character was in a situation where he was set up to be killed off of the campaign, which I have a million reasons why that's not true, and how he got himself there, and his character didn't die. But none of that really matters because at the end of the day, we're all trying to have fun at the table, and someone wasn't having fun at the table.
Yeah.
But where we got away from it in terms of mitigating it was kind of like I was talking about earlier. We kind of put a pause in it. Like the moment it wrapped up.
Yeah.
The moment it wrapped up, I think actually it was him waking up hours later after having been downed and not killed. And then we kind of put a pause in the campaign and took a break. I think I went outside and had a smoke, and then we just kind of bullshitted at the table. And that opportunity to talk at the table with everybody, realize the situation, even having a little bit of meta talk is a good way to resolve some salt, where I can tell, I was able to tell him like, hey, here's things that were happening in the background that you didn't realize, that you didn't inspect, that were somewhat obvious.
It was also like, as a fellow player, like me and Gray were like, we brought up like, hey, you know, like
we saw this coming.
we saw a couple of things that maybe were like, it wasn't like trying to continue to be antagonistic, but just try to highlight and like enlighten, like,
Yeah.
hey, these things were happening, like maybe in future play, like just realize that something like this is possible.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Well, also I did admit at the table that there were things that I could have done to maybe call a little bit more attention to it, like the post office guy acting a little bit shifty with all of the letters he had been sending, which is what inevitably led to it's what led to him getting ambushed, was all of the letters that he had been sending. There was no salt. In fact, it led to one of the funniest moments of the campaign. But talking about things happening in the background that can lead to salt, something to look for as a DM. And again, I didn't necessarily call to this as a DM, and I probably should have, though it didn't cause any salt, was the character Lucky with the whole sheriff's office thing, where he strung up this whole story about a town next door in an era where inter-town communication could happen, and like 24 hours went by or a day went by or whatever, and then the sheriff was like, yeah, you're lying about everything. And it was super traceable.
yeah,
It was super easy to track down your lies. And now I want to know who the fuck you are. But it didn't lead to salt, but it was something that, similar to the Ace situation, it was something that could have led to salt because I didn't give the opportunity for that mistake to have been realized either through a hint or through dice, which I do understand. I wouldn't do it with you guys. I'm really harsh with you guys because I know you guys can take it, and to a degree you guys like it, where, you know, you guys didn't think of something and you're fucked and that's your fault. But
I mean, I have we'll get there. But
Sure.
I have a very specific situation in which you salted my ass like crazy.
oh yeah. I know
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you just like to ambush people?
I do love a good ambush. Yeah, but the one I put Nix in, we'll get to it in a moment, but the one I put Nix in was actually unavoidable. He didn't make any mistakes or anything. It was the point of the game. Anyways, just something to look out for of the potentiality of causing salt with other people, with anybody outside of you two. I think having either hints being laid out that you as a DM could point to, because there was nothing for me to point to when, other than the fact that he had made a mistake, there was nothing that I could point to him like, yeah, but do you remember when I said the post office guy was shifty and you didn't do anything about it? I couldn't point to that because I never did that. Or a roll being made where like, hey, you know, give me an insight check on this post office guy, or anything along those lines. I think you can kind of mitigate salt a little bit where a player realizes that in a situation where a player has made a mistake and they are receiving consequences to their actions and potentially getting a little bit salty, I think having a breadcrumb trail where you can point to actual evidence of where you gave them opportunities would probably be a very strong way to mitigate it, because also, one, it'd be good in the moment of salt to be able to point to those things because that might calm their salt down. On the other side, he might just not have sent the letters. He might have passed the check to realize that the post office guy was shady. And then that creates this whole new narrative where it's like, how do I get information to my gang? You know what I mean? It could have been a very interesting moment instead of just allowing him to make mistakes. And I still hold he made mistakes,
Sure.
but
try to give him some routes of being able to recognize his mistakes.
Yeah, or at least opportunities to not make those mistakes. And if he makes them anyways, now you have
If he just
you have
ignores
ways to calm him
Yeah.
down when he's in a salty situation.
Yeah.
I think overall that would have been a better way to handle it. It's a moment where I grew as a DM,
Yeah.
where I wasn't even necessarily wrong, but there's things I could have done that would have been better anyways.
In hindsight, being better about signposts, being better about like
yeah.
you as a DM recognize that your player is falling into traps and setting himself up for a bad time.
Yeah.
Being like, oh, I got to make sure I got to do my best to try to cut this off, because as soon as this happens, it's like, yeah, this is going to be a big feel bad.
Do you recall anything? I know we're holding on to that next story because that is just a fuck up. So I don't want to get into it yet and lose track of the conversation.
No, I'll remember that.
Yeah. Do you remember any situations like that of players making mistakes that led to bad things that we were salty about in Lord's Fall?
About players making bad decisions?
Yeah, well, making bad decisions that led to consequences,
but yeah, like,
and us being salty about those consequences.
I mean,
No, I remember us just being handed the guy before we could do our terrorist acts.
That's not quite the same thing. That
to
was
me.
more like it was it was disappointing. It was disappointing that we nailed it so much. I agree with you. It was disappointing that we nailed it and were given our goal before the whole arc that me and you were just going to go unhinged on the entirety of that campaign in the
you
world.
were
So much
lining up.
fun stuff lined up, and then it's like, oh, here's your guy. I'm like,
Gray is
Come on.
disappointingly moving the people out of the wagon that he was setting up. Oh man, we don't have to.
Oh, my zombies, my bombs.
We're not gonna do the whole town gashing. Oh man, oh shucks, oh gee willikers.
It was the most disappointing a win could be.
yeah.
But also the win made total sense. Like, I totally understand the win. And like in the moment, I don't think we actually were salty at all because like we were like,
No,
oh,
no,
nice,
it's like a fun assault.
we nailed it, we nailed the narrative. But like, yeah, I do recall that. I don't remember really any genuine mistakes that led to consequences that we were salty about.
I don't think there was.
I think that campaign was mostly just us making you salty the whole time.
Yes. No.
Nah, we're not getting any tattoos.
No.
Sewers? No.
There was a lot of instances. I was gonna get to this after the one that you did to me specifically, but
I asked.
it's I think Lucky also has a lot of moments in which he got salty.
Is he just lucky in it? Can we stop calling him my brother and call
Yeah.
him Lucky from now on?
Yeah, because Lucky got salty with you because of the consequences of his actions, in the same way that like Ace got upset about the consequences of his actions. To no fault of Lucky, he got upset at what his actions to me, and it wasn't his fault at all. Just because I don't remember what I was managing, I don't remember what notes I was taking. I remember taking notes,
Oh,
and I remember
yes.
trying to follow.
That was a DM fuck up.
But he went up, and I gave in front of you guys. I gave you a random turtle enchanter that would just be like, "Oh, here's a bunch of magic items that you could purchase with the gold. I've been showering you with gold." And he was like, "Oh, can I get a custom item?" 100%. Yeah, the turtle's like, "Yeah, I'm an enchanter. I can give you a custom item."
Yeah.
So Lucky goes on this huge, like
Like a 30-minute description
crazy
of not just
detail.
what it is, but how he wants to use it because he's not sure how magic works.
Yeah.
So how he wants to use it, what specifically he wants
Yeah,
to use
the
it
kind
for,
of
so that
scenarios.
it can't be Monkey Pod.
Yeah, huge
And it wasn't
thing.
Monkey Pod, to be fair. You
Yeah.
just gave him something else.
Yeah. And then he comes back, they see the turtle. I remember working on it, like I remember like having the notes and being like, "Oh, the game's today or the next
Yeah.
day, whatever it was." Oh yeah, Lucky wanted this magic item. I look at my notes and there's like barely anything there. I'm like, "What
I've
was
done
he
that.
saying?
I've
what,
done that so
what did
many
he tell
times.
me?" I was like, something about like food and like organic. I was like, making organic things bigger or food. It's like, what spell is close to that? Create food and water. What does that do? Oh, it makes food bigger. Yeah, cool. Here's a ring. It makes a circle and makes
A circle on the ground.
circle on the ground makes food bigger.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
He wanted this to be fixed to the end of a shotgun so that you could make like a salt blast into
Yeah.
like a fucking meteor shower.
Yeah.
And what you gave him was something that activates bread onto the ground.
All it was the spell, create food and water. It was just that spell
Yeah.
on a ring that could be cast multiple times a day.
Yeah.
But not like through the ring. It like created a circle. It created like a space in which it created the food and water.
Uh-huh.
I understand that was my bad. That was my fault. I did poorly because I apparently just wasn't listening. The fix was I tried to make it actually functional. And what ended up happening was probably some of the greatest moments and greatest like actions, because what Lucky would do is he would intentionally hold on to breadcrumbs, and he would run up to somebody and have the breadcrumbs and smush them in his palm.
But bonus action breadcrumb.
Yeah, and then he would blow them out of his palm onto a person in the hopes that some amount of crumbs would be lodged in like their ear or
A
their
crevice of
nose
some
or
kind,
some
yeah.
sort of crevice. And then what I did was that
Such
he would
dumb campaign.
activate this ring on the crumbs, and I would essentially do like a ring of the ram, which is like 4d6 or something or whatever, like some high amount of damage. Because in my mind it would be, oh, the crumb is like in your earlobe, and all of a sudden it expands almost instantaneously to this giant thing of bread, and that's going to cause damage.
Yeah.
It's going to cause a lot of damage depending on where these crumbs are, because it was like a luck roll depending on like where the crumbs landed in what crevice. And
Honestly, what you should have done to mitigate that salt is just been like, I'm so sorry. You can absolutely have your object. My notes were insufficient. So here's what I'm willing to give you today. Ram of the rod or whatever. And next session we will retcon that to be what you wanted it. Can I get the details of what you wanted? But at the time you were very much of the mind that like once you deliberated you wouldn't change.
yeah. I mean, yeah, there was I learned a lot. I learned a lot.
You
as
were a new
from
DM
that
at the
campaign.
time.
But again, the actual consequences of me being being pretty stubborn in that campaign was I loved the breadcrumb thing, and also it created a almost like irrational level of hatred towards turtles.
Yeah.
That Lucky persisted with.
Multiples of us. No one liked turtles.
Yeah,
after
turtles became like
you created
yeah.
turtle hate in your world.
A hated species in this world was turtles because I wasn't listening.
Gray, do you have any experiences you could call upon about mistakes being made and then consequences happening and then people not liking the consequences?
Yeah, people in my experience don't tend to understand the consequences of their actions. I know one of my players, Morgan, the special one. He in our first campaign, he was a rogue. He wanted to do rogue things. He did rogue things all the time, even though when he didn't really need to.
Classic rogue.
Yeah,
Just roguing when you don't need to rogue.
Hey, we're gonna go leave town and get on a boat. It's like, okay, I'm gonna go stab 3 people.
Jesus.
Oh, this guy dead. It's like, all right, you didn't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
Oh, well, what if they saw us? Who cares?
Yeah.
You're not wanted here.
Yeah. You could get on a boat scene and it's actually fine.
Yeah. I remember once I gave him a potion where if you pour it onto somebody, they'll go into a berserk rage and then they'll die at the end of the potion. And he climbed the wall, killed 2 guards, threw that potion onto a golem. Didn't work. So there's a little salt from that. You understand it. I don't think magic doesn't necessarily work on golems, even in 5th edition, right?
I mean, I can understand that if you're like, it's a construct.
Yeah.
If the potion was only to work on like humanoids or like a specific sub branch of like,
I will say it
creature.
should have been in the wording.
Probably, but I mean, even then, like, as someone who
some
came from
golems
5th edition,
would- yeah,
I don't
some
think most
golems do
golems
have-
even take magic damage.
yeah, some golems do have like magic resistance,
Yeah.
But also, again, my easy out would be it's a construct.
Yeah.
Well, my easy out would be like, I mean, nothing is more interesting in my mind than when you get into a fight and you realize, like, you do something and then the DM says, that doesn't do as much damage as you think it does.
Mm.
And then there's so much intrigue in that, and we're like, why? It's just a human. And who cares what base human stats are? Who cares what base golem stats are? I'm telling you, it didn't do what you think it did. You got to pivot. And that should be a moment of intrigue, not salt.
I can see it being salty. I can see it being salty if you're the kind of player who like you're bringing too much meta information into the game. Which again, it's not necessarily the responsibility of the DM.
Yeah.
But it's a little
It's
bit.
why I only homebrew stuff, is because no one can tell me what my creatures do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because that I could see where like but that's something like managing salt on yourself. If you're an experienced player, if you're a very knowledgeable player, you kind of have to manage that on your own, which is especially, at least it's something I've learned playing with both Sav and Gray, where they heavily homebrew stuff, which is the extent of my knowledge as a player and my extent of knowledge of like monsters doesn't really mean anything, because it's I can try to do a thing and then like, oh, it doesn't work the way I think it should. Well, it's like, I only think it works that way because I have meta information that I'm bringing to the table.
You read a stat block once.
I read a stat block a while ago. This thing should work this way. And it's like, I wouldn't feel that way if I had no information. If
Yeah.
I'm trying to discover the information, I don't know what's happening.
It's a problem I have with people that are really into the hobby. Is like they have so much meta information, and if you ever ask them, would your character know that, they always say yes. And then it's like, I get, like, you're God then. Why are you here? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if you just have the answer to every single problem, you've taken exploration out of the campaign that makes the campaign just rolling dice at each other. If you have all of the information, it's not fun. Like, I think D&D's gotten so popular that it's gotten to the point where it's like, don't bother sending your players against a blue dragon, because they're going to do all of like the perfect amount of prep with zero exploration and just OP take out the dragon, because everybody at this point is so well versed on D&D lore and unwilling to allow for any exploration beyond the lore, as if the lore is law.
Or the meta information. The lore could be, your world lore could be different.
Sure, the
Yeah.
meta. Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
would say
Yeah,
something having magical resistance would still fall under lore.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yes, the meta information, the rule books, whatever, the stat blocks they've read in the past. If you just play like that, it's why I would never want to play an adventure module, like off the shelf adventure module. At least one that draws upon well-known things. Like if you get an adventure module that has what would be considered homebrew, it's fine. But it's like it's no longer dragons are no longer interesting. But they're only no longer interesting because of the way people approach it, as if their character knows everything they know.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like Ace has done it a couple times where he will be upset or he'll get salty about not being able to use certain information. And it's like, dude, the only reason why you know that is literally 5 minutes ago you're on your phone.
Yeah. This
going
isn't
through
even like,
Wikipedia.
it's not even like you know that and you're trying to put that meta into the game. You're Googling stuff.
Yeah, you're Googling things at the table and like, oh, how come my player doesn't have access to this kind of information? It's like, dude, like how? Especially in the particular game, we're talking about cowboys in the 1890s.
Yeah.
We're like, education wasn't. You got educated at the church school in your town, if that.
If that.
And like, what kind of information do you think you had? Like,
Yeah.
there's a chance that you would know some level. I think that was like, as a player trying to manage the salt of another player, which is
he got given that, so he wasn't salty.
No,
he
but,
was salty. He was salty in the meta above table argument afterwards, where it's like, hey man, you're Googling things at the table.
Yeah,
That's where he was salty.
What I was gonna say was just like trying to give him an out.
Yeah.
Of being like, let's say you were a farmhand, and like your father, your grandfather said, "Hey, don't let the cows eat this plant."
Yeah.
Because it'll kill the cows.
Yeah.
So like in that sense, so like you can leave it up to a roll. Like ask the DM for a roll of whether or not you have this information.
Yeah.
Because it's like you can't like if you're going to attempt to get outside information, at least try to bargain with your DM to be like, "Oh, do I know this about dragons? Well, how do you know this about dragons? Well, could I get a history check? Like, is it part of my past that I spent time at this library,
Yeah.
that I read up about dragons, that they did this thing?"
I just think it's so funny that people are like, "Oh yeah, I was a farmer until 6 weeks ago, and then I became an adventurer. Also, I know the stat block of every creature that's ever existed." Like, why would you know that?
I also have a very in-depth knowledge of physics
Yeah.
and geometry
Mm-hmm.
and chemistry because I know it. Therefore, my player character knows it.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. I think that I think in the community, that approach has become all too common, and it
Yeah.
makes it real. Like, I couldn't imagine not homebrewing things. Also, I'm a loser and I love homebrewing everything, but I hate the idea of
I
even allowing for the possibility of the situation of people approaching things in that way, where it's like, what? But like, why do you know that?
yeah, in my mind, to me, that Otis is on the player. You as a player coming into the game, realize that like there are some situations that you'll get upset that things aren't working the way that you think it is. And part of that is because like, hey, you're reliant on too much meta information.
Yeah.
You're trying to do something that you think will work because it makes sense in all of your books and everything. And like the information you have about how this creature works or how this particular thing works is like, yeah, but like be at the table, like be
Yeah.
at the table with your DM.
I mean, to a degree, you have to like you have to have your character has to have an understanding of mechanics of the game,
Yes, sure.
and like your character has to have a knowledge of like the level of magic that exists within your
Yeah.
world and things like that, because that's the only way you could operate in the world is by understanding the world around you to some degree. But the idea that you're going to know every resistance of every monster
yeah.
is crazy to me. And it just means that I can't put monsters in front of you because you're going to get upset. Or it's going to be boring. It's going to be one of the two. It's going to be boring or you're going to get upset.
Yeah. And I had like again, this is like somewhat early on and also somewhat learning your style as a DM, which was me having the knowledge that magical items should hit ghost. And then you had a ghost in front of it, or at least what I thought was a ghost.
So that's where I would disagree. Where I would disagree is that, yeah, if like, I get where you're going, where you brought meta information to the table and then it didn't work. And that's only because of your expectation of meta information. But also that's a pretty uniform rule that I just wasn't aware of. So I would say at that point, my creature was poorly written.
Even if it was, in that moment, at that time, and what you were playing, again, being at the table, being with what the DM is deciding, and not trying to, again, bring too much meta information with it. That happened. I got a little upset, and I was questioning what was going on. But
Actually, you didn't. I would say the other end of that, talking about player responsibility, you didn't get upset. You questioned it, and then I gave you my answer. You told me what is normal, and then you moved on before I could even say anything and be like, okay, how do I pivot? How do I play this game? How do I have fun?
No, I'm saying like there was a flash of like, oh, this, and that's
why doesn't this work?
Like, why doesn't this work? But again, I moved on and was like, oh, this is what's happening at the table. This is the creature I'm fighting. Maybe it's not a ghost. It's something else differently.
It wasn't a ghost, but yeah.
It's something else different. And so like, whatever, let's continue going. The reason why I say like, I don't necessarily think it's a mistake. The ending of that battle and the ending of that particular game was probably one of the most intense, insane, like cool, like moments that we've had at a table in one of our Realm Watcher games. And that wouldn't have happened if my gun was doing half damage.
No, it wouldn't have.
Like from the get at 100 and something yards, or 100 something feet away from the thing.
Yeah,
that wouldn't have happened.
So talking on lack of exploration, It was pretty early in the session where you saw the big bad. You thought you had an understanding of how things worked, and you caused a very bad situation because of that. You called upon your meta information and caused a horrible situation instead of exploring. And if you had done a little bit more investigation, maybe followed it a bit, watched it, you could have, because this is the way I did design it, even if I wrote it poorly, you could have gotten that information. And then you wouldn't have had the whole town come down upon you. So that part I agree, where you called upon meta information and fucked your player party.
It was fun though. It was a great
Oh,
session.
so the ending of that Nix is referring to is it was basically by shooting at the big bad, it had like a mind control cult of followers that was the entirety of a town that they now had to fight. And it was going very, very poorly. Nix happened to be an artificer with the Steel Defender, and it was so unbelievably close to being a TPK.
I think my character went down, right?
Gray's character got mind controlled.
Yeah.
And then your character either went down or was like very near to going down. And then it was the Steel Defender bit the big bad for his last HP.
Yeah.
And then it was the Steel Defender, the NPC saved the day. And it wasn't a TPK at all. You both lived. But it was like so nearly a TPK, and the Steel Defender is what won.
Didn't my character die in that
No.
game?
No, Norpaw's stuck around for a long time.
Yeah, I was really close to going. Yeah. I remember.
I mean, you might have been in death saves. I don't recall.
I think I might have been in death saves, but I remember it was like fucking gnarly. The ending of that was so fucking crazy. I remember being like, "Oh my god, how did we get out of this?"
Yeah. Well, the answer was you already fucked it, but
And then I think Gray's character had like lingering trauma from being like
yeah.
high blind.
So the description
Being
was
100 people for like a split second.
Yep. You were, I think, 30 different people looking through the eyes of 30 different people, 30 different minds all operating at the same time. You were all 30 of them at the same time, as well as being yourself, but not yourself as a priority by any means, for like 6 seconds or 12 seconds. It was 1 or 2 rounds. And then you just forever have the memory of being 30 different people at the same time.
It was a sanity check moment.
Yeah. There's a reason why I connect well with Delta.
Gotta play that again.
Yeah.
Once we get this all settled workflow wise, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the next thing to do. Also, I might pick up Pathfinder anyways. So
Nice.
Cool.
Last story I think before
yeah. Why
closing
don't
out.
you tell that and then we'll boogie out.
was what it's 2 instances of also Realm Watcher games. One was worse than the other one, which was
Oh yeah, there was 2 salts
Yeah.
from me
From
as the
you,
DM. That was also like me early DMing as well.
Yeah. It was also like so.
Oh, there were actually 3, but go ahead.
Yeah, it was. Again, my memory's pretty poor. I remember like
I remember
the
if you want me to
moments of it.
describe
Yeah,
them.
if you want to describe it better, you probably will describe it better than I will.
So one of them was a night of short stories. We actually played 3 different one-shots in the same night.
Oh yeah, that one.
I thought that's the one you were originally
No.
referring to. So
It's
anyways,
the same one.
that's the ambush one. So the short story was, in Realm Watchers, it was pretty
Oh, was it
common
the ambush
for
one?
you not to show up to the scene together. Realm Watchers could be at different parts in different parts of the realm and get called to a mission. So oftentimes you would have to get to the mission and find your fellow Realm Watchers. So without having to describe that, because that was a norm in our campaign, I started with Nix's character. And I said, you get to this town. And the point of it was I wanted to establish that while Realm Watchers are mostly existent through rumor, if a town has experienced Realm Watchers before, they might look at you like a hero, or they might look at you as the person that showed up and then their town was destroyed because they were fighting some monstrous creature.
Mhm.
Maybe you saved them and they look at you like a hero, or maybe there was so much destruction that they blame you for it.
Mhm.
I wanted to showcase the blame you for it. So you got into town, people started spitting in your directions, calling you a Deathbringer.
Well, I
things
got
like-
in like the center of town.
Yeah. You got into the center of town. Then people started surrounding you. And then people started fighting you.
Not just regular people, the people at the table.
Oh, yeah. So I surrounded him with NPCs first, and I hadn't brought in the other 2 players yet, though they were privy to the information. And then I had like this like really, bare-chested, brawly looking orc step forward and basically pick a fight with you. And then I turned over to Gray and was like, Gray, you're the big brawly orc. What are you doing? And then it was just, it was like kind of battle royale, but also just narrative or whatever. But I don't think you picked up on what I was doing, and I think you thought I was just here to kill your character off, and it did look like that because you started losing the fight, and you were surrounded by people, and you were getting the shit beat out of you, blah blah blah, and it looked like it was going to go extremely poorly for your character. And I knew that the ending was that they were going to let you go and tell you not to come back, but you didn't know that.
Yeah.
And you started getting salty through the mission. And to be fair, it is weird to intentionally just be like, I want to tell a story. You participate in it. So I get why, because your D&D player mind was trying to figure out what you're supposed to be doing and how you solve the problem. And realistically, there was no answer.
So I think what contributed, at least in that situation, I don't remember if Gan was before or after this.
I don't recall if it was before or after.
So as far as I was concerned, the character I was playing is probably one of my favorite characters I was playing in Realm Watchers.
And I was just killing them off.
And Realm Watchers, the consequence of dying is the character is gone. Like in the lore, they're dead, gone, never coming back.
Yeah, there was a mechanical thing that kind of blinks you out of existence.
So in my situation, I think Gan did happen before this,
It could be.
where in a different game there was a battling this like galactic level threat,
God, yeah.
this god level threat creature. The consequences of me being successful in the mission was the god captured my Realm Watcher, and my Realm Watcher was essentially gone.
Yeah.
I was like, damn it.
Yeah,
I liked him. It
I
was
liked
like-
my character. Why did succeeding mean my character is promoted off the table?
Like, this was the first time I played this character, and I liked the mechanics of how this character fought. It's like, whatever.
I was a new DM.
Like, it's fine. It's whatever. And then I bring Sal. I think it was Sal.
Yeah.
I bring Sal into a game that you were running. And then Sal is now in a situation where I think Sal is going to die.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like, the whole point of, like, I get the point of this game is to, like, TPK and kill it. But, like, this feels kind of
Forced.
like it's
Almost railroad.
like it's unwinnable. Like there's no
Yeah.
way out of this situation. And I'm just there getting my ass beat. I'm just like, because part of me was, as soon as it happened, was like, oh shit, this sucks. It's crazy. As a Realm Watcher, I can't kill people.
Yeah.
What I thought was gonna happen is I'm gonna fight these people and be so much better at them because I'm a big badass fighter. And the story you're gonna tell is, I'm gonna get pretty low, but I'm gonna beat up a lot of people. I'm part of what I have to do as a Realm Watcher is not kill these people.
To be fair, again, talking about being a new DM and new to like balancing, it was my intention for that like it was written in where like you could win the fights and then they would kick you out of town, but I didn't balance it very well, the levels that I had put the enemies. So like, yeah, you beat up I think 2 of them, and then by the 3rd one you were just too fucked to be able to do anything.
So it was just one of those things where like I knew I was getting upset, but it was one of those things where like whatever, I just kind of had to white knuckle it. Like it was just kind of like this is the game that we're playing.
Well, I also had to tell you, like, hey man, like I can see you're getting upset. Meta, I'm not just killing off your character.
Yeah.
Just play through it, please.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then and you kind of calmed down at that point, but I had to give away the ending for that to work, which means it was poorly written.
Yeah.
But again, I was new to DM.
Yeah.
I thought that one would be okay because it was a night of short stories. Like it was a 1-hour session, and we were gonna play other sessions that night. So like I thought it was the idea of telling a railroady kind of story I thought if there was ever a place for it, it would have been in a short story, but it just was so mechanically against how a player's mind works that it doesn't really it didn't make sense to do.
And I think looking back on it, I think it's an okay story to tell. I think there's a way to tell that story and a way to do that in a way that is fun and can tell the kind of thing that you want to tell.
Make
I
them much
think
weaker.
what makes Realm Watchers so difficult for that to do it right is the consequences are so high, and if your player doesn't know that like this character could be gone,
Yeah.
like it could the level of amount of feel bad
Yeah.
that could happen. There's such a threaded needle
I
to
think
be
it-
able to do.
I think if it really was just you beating up these people, so as a Realm Watcher, you're allowed to defend yourself. So people attacking you, you could have killed them. And then I think if they were just so low level, maybe there were more of them, but if they were just so low level that you were just beating your way up out of town, that would have been a better way to
Or
do
if
it.
there was a moment in which my watcher let the anger overcome him and started beating up people when he was already out of danger. Like, let's say he beat
Sure.
up people and people were backing away and he continued to chase.
Oh, at that point, though, again, talking about the breadcrumb thing and being like, hey, I need you to make a wisdom check.
Yeah.
Or an intelligence check or something. And I mean, like, hey,
You're out of danger.
you realize you are out of danger. And if you continue to pursue the path that you are on, the consequences of your oath will come at you. And then you have a choice as a player and you wouldn't be as salty. If you decide to just start killing people, you wouldn't be as salty
Yeah.
if that character does get taken out of play. And if you realize those things and grit your teeth and just walk away from the situation, then my story would have been accomplished the way I would have wanted to accomplish it.
Oh, and it as a result of that game, it instilled something in Sal.
Oh, we talked about it for so long. It allowed me to write another session with the one that the Watcher that removed his own arm.
Yeah.
So there was a whole nother thing. So like there was a lot of good that came out of
Yeah.
it, but it was for sure poorly written and created a
So-
lot of. You were getting visibly upset at the
Oh
table.
yeah. I was. It was upsetting.
But that was directly my fault. I put almost all of that down to because I could recognize so many angles of how that was written poorly,
Yeah.
of me just being a new DM and
Yeah.
just one, railroading, not a great way to do things. Two, ambushing a player if the intention is for something to be resolved, and if they didn't get themselves into the situation, ambushing them with. I mean, I didn't intentionally do this, but ambushing them in a situation that they can't get out of, not a good move. Like, there's so many ways that I grew from fucking up, and what better place to do that at a table with your friends?
I mean, yeah, but
Yeah.
that's a lot of stuff we talked about. It's a lot of managing salt is learning from
Yeah.
moments that people get salt from.
Well, I can. So I mentioned quietly that there was actually a third instance, but then I realized that one didn't end poorly. Very similar to the GAN one. I put you guys up against like a haunted house type situation.
Mm.
And then at the end of it, there was some like ethereal child or whatever, and you were supposed to like take the place of it and become the house and haunt other people. But there was a backdoor option, and you guys figured out and took the backdoor option, and it was resolved. Your character wasn't forcibly trapped for the rest of eternity, and you guys got a good session out of it with good mystery and good a good combat. It was fun. So like, and it was obviously extremely different, but very similar to the GAN situation. But this time written in a way where like winning doesn't mean you lose.
Well, the thing I was going to say earlier too is Sal, as soon as he figures out how to get rid of that bracer, he's fucking annihilating that town.
Yeah.
He's just going to go have some playtime
Yeah.
at that town.
That was such a putting it in front of Sal that you could do that. The ending to that session is probably one of my favorite endings of a session, which is there was a watcher who abandoned his watch, broke his oath, but did so in a way that couldn't be resolved by just snapping him out of existence as tradition. So a bunch of watchers were set out. to solve that problem. You guys went. You had a whole mission with mystery. You found the guy, and Sal had a whole conversation about how he removed the conduit and all of that stuff. And then at the very end cap of the session, and then you had a whole combat. You ended up taking that guy out. You ended up solving most of a background mystery that didn't need to be solved. All of this stuff. And then at the end of it, I approached you with an ultimatum of, hey, we're going to decommission you, which means kill you. Or, and this was with a level 20 watcher, or let me cast alter memory on you and change permanently the memory you have of the events that took place during this mission. And then one by one, I went to each person and approached them at canonically different times after the mission had been completed and got approval from all of you before moving on. I got to the point of approval to let me cast the spell on you, and then I moved on to another player. Once I had approval from all players to cast a spell on you, I told you, I cast a spell on you. Your memories have been altered. You can feel it. You know they're changed. You remember the mission exactly the way we played it. Which meant canonically, the things that happened in the mission are not the things that happened in the mission.
Yeah.
The story Sal had with the watcher that got away is not what happened.
Yeah. That's cool.
It was a good ending.
Yeah. Although the final thing before closing out, managing salt of NPCs. Speaking of your games, which is another short story game, we all go there, and then one of the players decides to destroy a magical artifact that essentially locks out these people into this forever.
Just damned an entire
just
town.
damned the whole town.
Yeah, I've
You know,
never
you
seen
just
you
can't-
guys lose a mission
Yeah,
in
you
the
can't
first
manage that salt.
5 minutes of the mission. You guys just absolutely fucked the entire mission.
No,
say
you-
you guys.
You
It was one
guys.
player.
Yeah.
Jack.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Jack
was
has a way.
that was wonderful. There was like I was sitting there trying to think about how to pivot, and I was like,
Yeah.
there's no pivot from this.
Yeah.
There was no pivot. You just unbelievably. The idea was you had to cast a little bit of magic to light up the runes, and the magic you cast was dispel magic, and there just weren't runes anymore. And there was no way. I couldn't think of a way out of it. So I just set a timer on my phone and let you guys play on for like another 5 minutes. And then I was
that
like,
was
yeah,
the best part.
how long would you guys continue
Because we were investigating. You're
trying
like,
to figure this out?
like, how long are you gonna give it for you guys to keep looking? It's like, I don't know, like half an hour.
Cool.
All right, half an hour goes by. How much longer?
Yeah,
Like, oh,
yeah.
fuck.
At what point do you guys give up and realize you fucked this?
Man, that town must have been really salty.
It's fine. In under a month, they were all dead. Wonderful. Well, speaking of good endings, thank you everybody for listening to Take the Damage podcast. I hope you enjoyed your time with us talking about managing salt.
Among other things.
I think we've pretty much solved nothing in this whole
Yep.
conversation, but you know, maybe there's some things to take away from.
No, probably not.
Probably not. Well, it was mostly tangents and.
I hope you're not salty about it.
I hope you're not salty about wasting your time and not learning anything. But hey, this is not an educational podcast.
Nope.
It's just a bunch of guys bullshitting about mechanics and experience and all of that good stuff. So, hope you had a good time. I'm Sav. You can catch me over on startplaying.games or potentially other places, depending on whatever links are in the description below the video. But thank you.
I'm Nix. If you want to follow me, there'll be links down below. I'm pretty sure it's just the YouTube channel right now, but who knows? That might get updated at some point in the future.
Graythorn, twitch.tv/Graythorn, YouTube at Highbar Graythorn. Links somewhere.
Links
You know.
somewhere.
Yeah.
There's also links to our Patreon and our website if you would like to become a subscriber or follower or whatever the fuck
Oh,
those things are. You could do so over there, as well as you could become a paid member and get access to our pre and post show, which is us just bullshitting before and after our recordings.
yeah. Also, 100%. I know that don't necessarily want to do the whole, hey, like and subscribe. But if people subscribe, those links that are in the description, most of them won't be broken. We could actually get those.
Oh yeah, if we get enough subscribers.
They could actually be functional links.
Yeah. Also, if we get enough subscribers, you guys don't have to go to Patreon and our website. You could just become a member on YouTube for the exact same content because we can't make a YouTube Premium, whatever it's called, membership until we have a certain amount of subscribers. So, push that train. Get that train going, eh, bud?
Thanks for listening.
And thank you for listening.